Hey, I'm Christy Swann and I study windblown sand. I develop and deploy field instrumentation to better measure the process of wind and how it moves sand grains around. I've spent most of my life chasing windblown sand around the world. And today we're going to talk about how to measure windblown sand on beaches, especially during storm events. Coastal storms bring big waves and high winds to coastlines, and both of those processes act to change the shape of the beach. Waves tend to erode the beach, temporarily storing sand in the nearshore, while winds act to rebuild the beach by depositing sand in coastal dunes. Tropical storms and hurricanes bring very strong winds to our coastlines, and these winds are capable of moving lots of sediment. Before and even during these storms, these winds move sand grains that can build dunes. Here, we see windblown sand being moved across a partially wet beach. They move in streamers, or some people call them sand snakes. So how do we measure this interaction between waves, wind, and how the beach responds? In order to determine how a beach will respond to a storm, we need to consider all the factors affecting that beach: the atmosphere, the ocean waves, sediment properties on the seafloor, and the shape of the subaerial beach. We can study waves in laboratories or take field observations of waves in the fields. We combine those observations with lab and field measurements of windblown sand to figure out how these processes combine to change the shape of our beaches. For this lesson, we're going to talk about how the atmosphere generates winds that are turbulent that ultimately moves the sand grains on the subaerial beach. Here is an example of what turbulence looks like. The blue arrow is pointing to the beach itself and the sand grains, and above that we have a cartoon of turbulence. Turbulence changes as a function of height above the bed. Closer to the surface, these fluctuations are much smaller, and further away from the surface, the fluctuations are much bigger. Turbulence is important because that's ultimately what's moving the sand grains. We use a lot of instruments in the field to capture the turbulence. And we don't want to capture the turbulence at one height. We want to capture those small fluctuations close to the surface and the large fluctuations away from the surface, because these together will help us calculate how much momentum is being imparted on the surface by the wind, which is actually moving the sand grains. We do this by using sonic anemometers, which are measuring the three-dimensional velocity fluctuations of the wind, cup anemometers, which measure mean wind speeds at various heights, saltation traps to capture sand grains and their distribution with height, and we use video to be able to image streamers so that we can calculate the horizontal variability of transport. Another way that we can measure how much windblown sand was moved on the beach is by the use of drones. A couple of days ago, Tropical Storm Marco approached the coast of Mississippi. There's Marco, and there's the coast of Mississippi. I asked my colleague, Shawn, who is an expert at using drones to measure the response of beaches to storm events, if he would come out and get some observations for us. And I had to bring my favorite research assistant, Pete. Using drones, we can fly up and down the beach, covering a much larger spatial area with higher resolution than we were able to do before drones were readily available. With drones, we take the images, stitch them together, georectify them, and create maps of the three-dimensional topography of the beach. We do this before and after storms to see where the topographic change occurred. These maps help us figure out if dunes accreted due to a significant amount of windblown sand being deposited in the dunes, or if the wave run-up was so large that it eroded the dunes. These maps give us clues about the processes acting on beaches during storm events. There are a number of scientists that are focused on measuring windblown sand and waves in both the lab and the field. Together, these two processes shape our beaches, and working with scientists across disciplines, we can combine our collective efforts to tease out the processes acting to change the shape of our beaches. We use those measurements to improve our models so that we can better predict the resilience of our coastlines.